Hi, I'm Matt from Mud and Blood, a podcast dark and grim, and I'm back this month for another visual review, this time of Delta Green. Before I get into the visual review, though, a quick disclaimer exactly what I mean by visual review. If you're new to this channel or you found this video because you're looking for a review of the game, this video is not going to give you that. We have done a roughly 2-hour full review of Delta Green on our audio-only podcast, which is also called Mud and Blood. You can catch a link for that at mbcast.co/54. And yeah, we go into everything about this game, including the mechanics, the setting, etc. One of the categories we talk about are visuals, and that's actually why we're doing these YouTube videos as well. We cannot show our listeners on our audio-only podcast exactly what we mean when referring to these visuals. So we have created for all of our reviews, a visual review so our listeners can see exactly what we're talking about when we're rating the game. So that little disclaimer to one side, let's jump in. This review will also be made up of 2 parts. The first part I'm going to be showing you the outside of the book, talking about format, etc., size. And then the second part, I'll head over to my desk and open the book up and show you the actual spreads, including the artwork and the layout, etc. So let's start by talking about the size first. This is letter format, so that means it's 11 inches tall by 8.5 inches wide. In metric, that is 28 by 21.5 centimeters. It has a matte hardback cover, Delta Green, and Agent's Handbook. And in fact, the subtitle, A Role-Playing Game of Lovecraftian Horror and Conspiracy, are all kind of called out in glossy embossing. In fact, also on the spine, Delta Green Agent's Handbook is also called out. I actually also have the Handler's, it's called the Handler's Guide. The Handler's Guide and A Night at the Opera. But they basically, I'm not showing all of those, I'm just showing you the Agent's Handbook, because this is if you're going to play the game or you're going to run the game, this is the main book that you'll need. They also follow the same format in terms of layout and hardback covers and things like that. There is no ribbon in the spine, and it does have black head and foot, what are they called? Bands. Headbands and foot bands. It has an oversewn binding, which you can see. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little gap between the how the papers are bound together and the spine itself. Flat spine. And that's about it. I'll show you the end papers and everything else when I put it down on the desk. That's pretty much it. So that's the outside of the book. Let's head over to the desk and see the rest of it. Okay, so here's the Agent's Handbook on my desk. Before we take a look actually at it inside, I just want to quickly talk about page count. This one has 192 pages. In comparison, the Handler's Guide, which is basically the GM's guide, is a much thicker book. This goes to 368, I think I counted earlier. Double check. Yeah, the back page here, 368 pages. So this is the Handler's Guide is almost double the width, but we're not going to really look at that. This is really a visual review. We're looking at the elements of the book. So for that, we only need one because they use the same layout. So, turning to a random page on the inside, let's look at what makes up the layout of this book. First of all, let's talk about how many columns. It's basically 2 columns throughout. You can see here this isn't in a 2-column format. That's because this is a full page of what looks like fluff. This is about program managers, which is one of the elements within Delta Green organization, with a table in there as well. In fact, this is what tables look like, which is nice to see, alternating row shading and a black header row. But other than that, unless there's some sort of like handout-looking fluff text, everything is in a 2-column layout, like that, as you can see here. Chapters start with a 2-page spread like this. On the left hand, we get the chapter name with an illustration taped on. I think they're all taped on. I haven't actually double-checked that, but there's basically an illustration underneath the chapter name like this. On the right-hand side, we get a bit of fluff text in the form of what looks like a handout, kind of. So on it, like a memo or a handwritten note or an email, something like that, often with bits redacted from it. Nice little touches. In fact, you can see here there's like a picture of a key that's taped to this as well, which is really nice. Here we have a full page of a whole full spread of tables. But yeah, they follow that same format I discussed before. I don't really spend too much time on there. This is the equipment section, which is why there are so many tables. Here's something I wanted to look at. Basically, if we look at the backgrounds first, the background has this kind of distressed off-color style to it. The nice thing is that every layout is slightly different. Every page, every spread is slightly different. So if I was to go to this page, for example, look, there's a blemish here. Does not exist on this page. Instead, we have this kind of darker stain across here, which does not exist on this spread. So every spread is slightly different. Here we've got a bit of a distressing. It looks similar, probably mirrored to this one. So they do reuse some of the graphics, but they don't usually put them in exactly the same place. This is a nice little touch because it just means that it feels a bit more like a unique document that has that someone's actually used and have got their smudgy fingerprints on, or there's a bit of a water stain somewhere, rather than just having exactly the same background graphic used throughout. Anyway, small touch. The other thing I wanted to touch on are the level 1 headers. They are in this black font with a double line underneath, whereas the level 2 headers have this, it looks like a slightly different font to the level 1 ones, and in red text, it's not in bold. Callout boxes tend to be in this black format here when they're adding to the kind of rules section of the text, so black background with white text. But they do have a variety of other. There's a call-out box here, which is basically somebody writing handwritten notes in the in the book, circled. I've seen some other ones. We just looked at them when I was going through the pages previously. Again, we got some scribbled notes in there. Would have been good to have earmarked this. Here's one. So this is an optional rule, and it's in sort of like it's been torn out of a piece of paper and stuck in there. So that's another call-out box, but in a different style. The nice thing about this is that it does have a very, very consistent visual style going throughout, and that is very much helped by the fact that it has one main artist working on it, which is Dennis Detwiller, who's also one of the main contributors to the text of the book. In fact, he has a Patreon campaign where he produces tons and tons of content, including artwork. And that really helps with maintaining this sort of visual style throughout the book. That it basically, the illustrations are all done by him, so they all have the same feel to them. Even the background elements, everything is basically created by Dennis. And as a result, it has a really, really excellent visual style. Okay, I think that's really all I wanted to talk about. Just quickly mention the appendices, because, we did that for the Call of Cthulhu visual review. We have the first one is about, the first bit in the appendix is about tradecraft, and this is about basically keeping a low profile. So it has tables on going unnoticed, so task, skill required, possible opposing skills for things like going unnoticed, surveillance, pursuit, breaking and entering, search and arrest, blah, 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 blah. With some text about what those all mean. Then we have a glossary of terms. Equipment, individuals, and when it says individuals, it's things like, what is a dangle? It's an agent set up to be recruited by another intelligence service as a double agent. So the kind of Delta Green lingo, if you will. Information, misinformation, miscellaneous operations, organization procedures, etc. Recommended media to watch here. In fact, these are books, I think. So recommended, looks like basically mainly books. They do have the WikiLeaks website in here as well, and they do have otherwise I think it's articles or books. I was kind of expecting to see some films or TV like the X-Files, for example. But anyway, then we have an appendix which is fairly big, goes across, as you can see there, 5 pages. Acknowledgements. This was Kickstarted, so there's a lot of Kickstarter names in here. And then the Open Gaming License and a character sheet, or an agent sheet, I think it's called. So that, in a nutshell, is Delta Green. Not really a lot else to talk about with this, because the artwork is similar all throughout. It's It's very easy on a flick through. Any piece of art you would have seen as I'm going through this book is all done by the same person. It all looks excellent, and because it's all done by the same person, again, it results in a very consistently great looking book. And again, this follows suit in the Handler's Guide, which has exactly the same format as we've seen here. It's a much more book associated with fluff, so about the world of Delta Green, whereas this one has a lot more to do with the rules. So that one has a lot more in terms of there's some very different kind of imagery in it. There's a lot more in terms of handouts and things like that, fewer tables, etc. But still follows the same visual theme. So that was Delta Green. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Catch you next time.